Papyrus leapt to his feet. What was Undyne doing here? He shut himself in the closet. After a few seconds, he came to the conclusion that that was a temporary solution at best, and he felt a little silly. What should he do? He called out, cracking his bedroom door open.
I can't hear you. I'm very ill and asleep.
Too late. Papyrus realized the fatal flaw in that response. He heard the thump of footsteps coming up the stairs and had just enough time to jump back from the door. Papyrus! Undyne slammed the door open and strode into the room, a heavy backpack slung over one shoulder. I brought you some stuff to do while you're stuck in bed. She trailed off, the exuberant grin slipping from her mouth. Papyrus didn't notice, focused on the burden she was carrying.
You shouldn't be lifting anything.
He moved to tug the backpack out of her grip. It was heavy enough that he needed both arms to hold it.
What are you even doing here, Undyne? He scolded. You should be resting.
She could have hurt herself. What was she thinking, travelling all the way to Waterfall with such a heavy pack? Sans scooted into the room behind Undyne, puffing a little and visibly pissed.
What the hell? You can't just barge in here hollering when...
Undyne ignored them both. A low growl rumbled in her chest, and her sole remaining pupil was a tiny dot of rage. Cobra fast, she grabbed Papyrus by his shirt and hauled him closer, staring at the side of his face.
Who did that to you?
She hissed, slow and cold, like deep water. Even though her anger wasn't directed at him, Papyrus couldn't help the shiver that ran down his spine at her voice. Undyne could be scary when she wanted to be.
No one,
he said. She whipped her head around to glare down at Sans, who put his hands up in surrender at the sight of her. Papyrus didn't blame him one bit.
You said he was sick.
Her teeth snicked together on the last syllable with the sharpest of clicks.
Well, I mean...
Sans stammered, trying for a disarming chuckle that came out as more of a squeak.
It's kinda like being sick, right?
Undyne's hand flexed, and Papyrus could feel a couple of her claws poke through the fabric. He sighed. He liked this shirt. She turned back to him.
Who did it?
She said.
I will put them in the fucking ground.
You will have to, put me in the ground then, Papyrus said. Because I did it. Not on purpose, he added quickly when Undyne's face shifted. It was an accident. Sans lied for me and told you I was sick. I'm sorry, Undyne.
That was sort of the truth. Sans caught his eye, and the two of them shared a guilty little nod past Undyne's shoulder. This was between them. Undyne meant well, but this wasn't any of her business. Papyrus didn't quite trust her to be careful around Sans if she misunderstood. Undyne let go of Papyrus's shirt, her facial fins twitching in agitation.
Accident? You mean you hit yourself with your own attack?
It's happened once before, Sans said, edging forward now that Undyne's temper had blown over.
I guess that's what happened with his arm.
He glanced sideways at Papyrus, looking for confirmation. Papyrus nodded. Undyne looked back and forth between the two brothers, frown deepening. You're sure?
Sans shrugged. Yeah?
I think I would know,
Papyrus said, arching a brow. Hey, Undyne said, waving one hand. I didn't mean anything by it, Paps. Relax. It's just... She shrugged her chin, brow furrowed. I never heard of a monster hurting themselves with their own magic, that's all. Not by accident, anyway. Papyrus could feel Sans staring at him.
Just because you've never heard of it doesn't mean it can't happen,
he said. He threw him what he hoped was an appropriately derisive tut for good measure. Yeah, no doy, Undyne grumbled. She looked at them for a few seconds more, then threw her hands up.
Bah! I'm over it, she growled.
Accident. Why not? You would be the one to manage it, doofus. She punched Papyrus on the arm. It was the wrong arm. He yelped, shrinking away from her and covering his arm with his hand. Hey! Undyne said, stricken. Are you okay? I didn't hit you that hard, did I? Her hands hovered in the air, like she was scared Papyrus would shatter if she touched him again. Sans shoved his way between them. Would you be careful? Now it was Undyne's turn to step back. I barely touched him, I swear.
It's fine,
Papyrus said, tugging at Sans's hood.
It's not a big deal.
She can't keep... What's that? Undyne was staring at Papyrus's wrist. His sleeve had slipped back a bit. Papyrus pulled it down again. Too late. Undyne caught hold of his hand and shoved his sleeve up to the elbow. Papyrus hissed and tried to pull away. God, that didn't feel good. At all. The fabric of his shirt might as well have been sandpaper or broken glass. He studied his bookcase on the far wall so he wouldn't have to see her reaction. Holy shit, Undyne said. Sans said nothing, just made a very soft sound of distress. Papyrus's intention of keeping those injuries hidden hadn't lasted any longer than the realization that he hadn't brought any clean clothes with him when he'd showered. But Undyne wasn't helping by metaphorically rubbing his brother's face in it. What the hell did you do, Paps? She lifted his shirt to see his ribs, also scorched and bruised on that side. Papyrus slapped her hand away. Rude! Lay off, Undyne, Sans said, sullen and quiet. Undyne shook her head. How can you be so calm about him being half charred?
I'm fine, Undyne, really.
Papyrus shook her off and pulled his sleeve back down, gently.
It was just a stupid accident. That's all.
Papyrus, Undyne said, grimacing. This is more than an accident. I think we need Alphys to check you out. That was not what he needed. That was about the last thing he needed. Papyrus shook his head vehemently. No, thank you. Undyne gaped like a fish. What do you mean, no? She gestured to the bruise on his face. You're fucked up all down your side. You broke your own damn arm. Not to mention none of those should even be possible. Something's wrong. She crossed her arms, frowning. Her facial fins were clamped down tight against her neck. Look, I know I blew you off earlier when you were freaking out, and I'm sorry. Maybe... She trailed off and blew out a sigh. I don't know. Maybe I rushed everything too much. If this thing with you is getting worse, then... That's okay, Papyrus said, relieved and deeply heartsick at once. This could be over. He could make it be over.
If you think it would be best, I'll quit the guard right now.
It would be for the best, he knew. Maybe under other circumstances, being in the Royal Guard could have been fulfilling and great like he thought it would be. But... not now. Not the way things were now. He could find a way to be content as a largely anonymous sentry. He could find a way to deal with whatever retribution Flowey meted out.
I did it.
Papyrus and Undyne turned to look at Sans, who met Undyne's eye with a sort of miserable defiance. Undyne curled her lip in a baffled snarl.
What the hell are you talking about?
Sans shoved his hands in his pockets.
It wasn't Papyrus's attack that nailed him. It was mine. We were practicing yesterday, and I got too cocky with one of my blue attacks.
Papyrus caught the telltale hunch of Undyne's shoulders and coughed.
It wasn't really his fault, Undyne, he said, mind racing. I, slipped on a patch of ice at what happened to be an inopportune moment.
The lie stuck in his mouth, but he managed.
Yeah,
Sans said, shooting a glare at Papyrus.
But it wouldn't have happened at all if I'd have been more careful to begin with.
Undyne gnawed on a lip, clearly confused.
You're trying to tell me that Sans did all that,
she said, gesturing at Papyrus in general.
In one hit? You gotta be kidding!
Sans looked more downcast than ever at this, but nodded. Papyrus couldn't help but feel somewhat offended on his brother's behalf.
Sans is good at magic, he snapped, when he tries. And technically, the way I ran into it, he added, it was more like 5 or 6 hits.
You can't kick him out when he didn't do anything wrong,
Sans blurted, forcibly dragging the three of them back on topic.
I'm a liability, Papyrus said, not to be outdone. I'm already missing work, and I'm not even sick.
And he was a time bomb. Sans waved his arms.
Because I beat you up!
Undyne kept opening her mouth to interject, but there was no space for her, head whipping back and forth as though spectating a particularly tense ping-pong match.
That was an accident.
That doesn't mean I hurt you any less.
They're just surface wounds, Sans. I'm a lot tougher than you are.
How does that make it okay?
Because I'm fine,
Papyrus said. Why was Sans so distraught over this? It wasn't like he'd been seriously injured. By tomorrow he'd be good as new in any case. Sans pressed the heels of his hands into his eye sockets.
Would you stop saying that? Oh my god, shut up!
Both brothers looked at Undyne. Her mouth was curled up into the manic grin of a woman pushed to the limit.
Is anyone in this house gonna be straight with me?
She crossed her arms.
Just tell me the truth, will ya? You're both driving me nuts!
It was hard to keep the argument going with that baleful yellow eye trained on them. Papyrus, at least, had somewhat lost his train of thought. The next several seconds were filled with a lot of avoided eye contact and non-committal muttering. Neither brother wanted to be the one to tell Undyne what had actually happened, but they couldn't get a better cover story worked out with her standing right there. Undyne rolled her eye.
It's even worse in stereo.
Fine! Papyrus jumped and saw Sans do the same. They were clearly both amateurs in the shouting department.
Fine!
Undyne snapped again, at a more bearable volume.
Close ranks on me. See if I care.
She shrugged. Her voice was like pickle juice.
I mean, we're friends and all, but whatever.
Papyrus felt like dirt. Seeming to sense his distress, Sans shot him a warning look. Right. Sans had stuck his neck out, lying to Undyne to cover up Papyrus's disastrous loss of control last night. As much as he hated to hurt Undyne's feelings like this, he couldn't throw away the fragile alliance that had sprung up between himself and his brother. After everything they'd been through, It felt like being back on the same team again, however shameful the method. He started at Undyne's hand on his shoulder. His good one. "Look," she said, laying her other hand on Sans' shoulder. "I'm not happy about being lied to, but this isn't the hill I'm gonna die on. As long as everyone's okay, you can sort out your own shit. I don't know why you two boneheads got the idea I was gonna can anybody." She glared at Sans, then at Papyrus. "And you better not even think about quitting, Paps. I mean it. But shut it. We ride together, we die together, guardsmen." Undyne's glare softened. "It's gonna take a while for you to find your feet, Paps. I don't expect anyone to be flawless and have everything figured out when they join up. It's a process. In fact," she said, mouth twisting into a proud grin, "I think we may have found your niche, and it's all thanks to you curb stomping me." Papyrus flinched. "I really don't think that's my niche, Undyne." No. Undyne shook her head. "I don't mean that," she said. "Take a look in the pack." Papyrus crouched and unzipped the pack. It was full of paper?
"What," Sen said, "is all that?"
Undyne chuckled and gave Sans a good-natured slap on the back that nearly bowled him over. "That's what's gonna keep old Paps busy while he's sick in bed, Sans." Papyrus caught the faint smell of brimstone, realized what all that paper was, and snatched a page out. He skimmed a few lines. "Undyne? These date back months!" "I know, right?" Undyne grinned wider. "I'm supposed to prepare a master report for King Asgore at the end of every month, but I forgot about it for the last 4 months." Haha. 4 months. "You're serious?" Papyrus supposed this was just karma coming to call again, for his many transgressions. Wait. This was his niche? Fielding paperwork? Undyne made a sort of "oh well" gesture. "You can do it," she said breezily. "I actually read that report you dropped off, and it was way better than I could have done. So organized, and you write so neat." "I just write so I can read it later," Papyrus said, a little passive-aggressively. Maybe. Possibly. "See? You're a genius!" Sans' face had been steadily darkening during this exchange. He crossed his arms.
"So your response to hearing my brother was sick," he said calmly, "was to dump a backpack of your neglected work on him? Am I understanding that correctly?"
Undyne waved him off. "As the newly appointed official clerk of the Royal Guard, now it's his backpack full of work," she corrected. "And it won't take him that long."
"Are you serious?"
Sans drew himself up to his full height.
"Do you know how long it took him to sift through a week's work of that illegible crap?"
He stabbed a finger in the pack's direction.
"This'll take a week, maybe even 2, and that's if he doesn't do anything else."
Papyrus kept looking over the documents, but he watched the pair from the corner of his eye socket. Undyne was trying hard to wink. "Exactly. You're welcome," she said, giving Sans a conspiratorial nudge with her elbow. She cleared her throat. "I mean, this is kinda important. So you're exempt from patrol duty until it's done, Paps." "Important enough to leave for 4 months." Papyrus gave her a doubtful look. She was trying to keep him in sight. As his captain, she could, of course, change his job duties at will, but he wished she'd been upfront about it. This felt a little patronizing somehow. At least, she'd actually read his report, he mused. It hadn't been a pointless exercise at all. Undyne chortled. "Yeah, well, you know how it is. But seriously, she said, Asgore's starting to get kinda naggy about it. So start on it as soon as you can, okay? Sans seethed at her side. Undyne didn't seem to take notice, but Papyrus knew his brother's tells. I'll start in the morning, Papyrus said, hoping this was an acceptable compromise. Dragging Undyne into their fighting was undesirable at best, and Papyrus would rather avoid it. Sans would hit the ceiling if he tried to do any work today. It took a lot to rile him to such a degree, but the stress of last night coupled with Undyne's less than soothing presence seemed to be wearing away at his normally unflappable brother's nerves. Undyne looked put out for a moment. Papyrus watched the way Sans was eyeballing her, as though waiting for her to say something worth yelling at her over. Sans's glare faltered.
Wow, he said. You're really clammy.
Papyrus stood, the mountain of paperwork forgotten. He's right. Her scales were coated in a thin slime, and duller than usual. It was subtle, but her fins quivered slightly, as though it were taking effort to hold them out. Papyrus frowned. You're not feeling well, are you? You overdid it. Undyne crossed her arms. Relax, dorks. I'm totally better now. She puffed up a chest, radiating health, or at least trying very hard to. I even got a workout in before I came here. Gotta make up for the gains I lost while I was lazing around the house. You get me? No wonder she looked like she was about to fall over. After the night he'd had, the morning he'd had, somehow this was the last straw. The only way I'm getting you, he said, pinching a facial fin and frog-marching her out of his room, is downstairs so you can eat something and rest before you go straight back home. Anger with a constructive purpose zinged through him. It felt almost cleansing. Ow, 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 ow! Papyrus, jeez! Papyrus could hear Sans snickering behind them. That alone was worth any amount of embarrassment on Undyne's part. She deserved it for being so reckless. Honestly, she was even worse than Sans. He released her fin only when they'd reached the couch. Sit, he said, and dashed to the kitchen to fetch her a glass of water. She dehydrated easily. When he came back, Sans was helping her arrange the Afghan on her lap in a particularly gloating way. Undyne scowled at him as she was accepting the glass from Papyrus. What are you grinning about?
Nothing, Sans said. It's just funny when it's happening to someone else is all. Remote?
Yeah, she grumbled, but took the remote when Sans offered it. Get your bony asses in the kitchen and make me some food then. She switched the TV on and proceeded to ignore both of them, sulking and sipping at her water.
Man,
Sans said, once they passed through the archway into the kitchen.
Poor Alphys. She must have been a nightmare to deal with when she was actually laid up.
Alphys did seem rather tired when I saw her,
Papyrus conceded. Undyne took a lot of pride in her physical strength. She couldn't have been an easy patient. Rummaging around for ingredients. Leftovers were fine when it was just the two of them, but guests deserved fresh food. Papyrus tried to figure out what was niggling at him, like he'd forgotten to do something. Oh, Alphys. Here he was, ignoring her again.
Sans, he said, would you mind getting a pot of water started?
Sans shrugged and went about his task, while Papyrus got his phone. There was another message.
Is at Strongfish 91 at your place?
Surprised face. Papyrus answered in the affirmative, and had a reply seconds after hitting the send button.
Oh, good. Dozed off, and she was gone when I woke up.
Papyrus gave her a brief rundown of Undyne's visit.
OMG, you need me to come get her?
Catching movement, Papyrus looked up from his phone.
Sans, no, you have to let the water boil first. Sans set the fistful of uncooked pasta on the counter.
"'Kay," he said, shrugging. "Who you texting?"
Alphys, who actually did seem to be online all the time. Papyrus hadn't expected to have a whole conversation while the water boiled.
"Oh, that's good."
Sans seemed to perk up some.
"She's good people."
Yes, she's very nice.
Papyrus exchanged a few more messages, answering Alphys's questions.
Hey, instead of writing it all out longhand, you could type it up and send it to me to print.
Huh. That was a good idea, actually. Papyrus sent a reply saying so. Come to think of it, there might not have been enough paper in the whole house to write that monthly, now quarterly, report. Once the water came to a boil, Papyrus said his goodbyes and put his phone away. He had the feeling that Alphys would have happily kept trading messages all afternoon, but he really needed to get the sauce started.
"She wondering where her fish wandered off to?"
Sans said, as Papyrus diced vegetables. There wasn't time to properly mash them, unfortunately. Maybe they'd soften up enough when they cooked that it wouldn't matter.
Yes, looks like Undyne gave her the slip.
Sans made a face.
"Kinda hard to imagine her sneaking anywhere."
She can be surprisingly quiet, believe it or not.
She gotten the jump on Papyrus more times than he could count, usually with painful and embarrassing results. With exhausted as Alphys had looked when they'd spoken, it didn't surprise him a bit that Undyne had been able to get past her. Papyrus had Sans keep an eye socket on the noodles while he cooked the sauce. He added some oil to the pan, hoping it would make everything a little more liquid. As he'd feared, it didn't really end up as a sauce, just oil and vegetables and seasonings, all still clearly visible and not a homogeneous paste like it was supposed to be at all.
"Smells nice,"
Sans said. Papyrus thought he detected a hint of surprise in his brother's voice, but let it go.
I ruined it, he sighed.
Now that the pasta was drained and he tossed everything together, it looked really stupid. Sans shrugged.
"I don't know, bro. I think it looks kinda nice like that."
Undyne was probably going to need another glass of water to wash this mess down. Oh well. Papyrus fixed a plate for her and brought it out. She was sprawled across the couch, and looked to be having as hard a time getting comfortable as Papyrus usually did. "Thanks, Paps," she said, sitting up and taking the plate from him. She peered at the multicolored disaster. "Looks different from usual. You experimenting?" Papyrus sat down next to her, resting his chin on his hand.
No, he said gloomily. It just didn't come out right. I'm sorry if it's terrible.
She took a bite, chewing methodically. Her eye widened and she swallowed. Holy crap.
That bad?
Undyne didn't answer right away, too busy shoveling more failed spaghetti down her gullet.
"Not bad,"
she said, finally, spraying a bit. She gulped down her current bite after minimal chewing.
"Not bad at all. What do you do different?"
Papyrus shrugged. He was happy she liked it at least, even if he didn't understand why.
I cut everything up with a knife instead of punching it, and I put some oil with it in case it helped melt vegetables, even though it didn't really,
he said. It was no wonder it hadn't cooked quite right. Could vegetables melt? Cut things with a knife and use scalding hot oil. Undyne looked thoughtful for a second. I could get behind that. Yeah. Sans wandered out to the living room and sat on Papyrus's other side. He glanced at Undyne, who was still eating.
"See, look at you worrying about nothing," he said quietly. "She likes it fine."
In a matter of minutes, Undyne had polished off the whole plate and set it aside on the floor. The three spent the next half hour or so chatting, awkwardly at first, since they were all still a little ticked off at each other, and watching TV. At some point in the middle of a soap opera they'd all seen before, Papyrus became aware of a weight on his shoulder. Undyne had fallen asleep. He wasn't sure when that had happened, but there was a considerable patch of drool on his shirt already.
"Oh my God,"
he said, just above a whisper.
"Really?"
She was on his injured side, but her added weight wasn't doing much to add to the stinging ache he was already feeling, which was good. He just couldn't move, which wasn't so good. Sans looked over at them and smiled.
Wow, she's out.
"I can see that, Sans."
Here,
Sans said, shifting to lean against Papyrus.
I'll help prop you up.
Papyrus huffed in irritation.
"I don't know if that counts as helping."
Sans didn't answer. Papyrus was about to say something else when he heard soft snoring. Really? Well, now he was truly trapped. He couldn't even get to his phone to talk to Alphys with the two of them leaning on his arms. Great. Papyrus woke up with a view of the ceiling, and had a brief moment of panic. What time was it? How long? He caught sight of the clock inside. Oh, good. He had hours left until he needed to leave. He relaxed back onto the cushion, which was breathing? At some point, Undyne had tipped the other direction, and the three of them had ended up more or less stacked like fallen dominoes. Papyrus was half draped over Undyne, leeching her body heat. Sans was curled up on both his and Undyne's legs, like a shabbily dressed dog. They were both still asleep. Gingerly, Papyrus moved to extricate himself from the tangle of limbs without waking them. Undyne muttered under her breath, her brow furrowing.
I don't want to go to school today,
she said, catching Papyrus in a crushing bear hug and rolling them over.
Mrs. Kraken purpled all the horses. It's not fair.
Well, crap.
"Undyne!"
Papyrus hissed. He elbowed her in the ribs, gently.
Mom, I said I don't.
Undyne blinked her eye open.
Oh, hey, Papyrus, she said blearily. What are you doing in my house?
"You're in our house, actually," Papyrus said. "And you're, kind of crushing me."
Undyne scrunched up a face in confusion. After a moment, she woke up fully, took stock of the situation, flushed, and pushed herself away with a squawk to flop half onto the floor.
Sorry, Paps,
she said, rubbing the back of her head and grinning. No hetero.
Right, don't worry about it.
Papyrus propped himself up on his elbow. Are you alright? He asked, watching her flex and shake her arm.
Yeah, I think I just slept on it wrong.
Sans stirred, drawing in a yawn and stretching.
Oh man,
he said, disentangling himself with their legs.
I had the weirdest dream that I was working in a cheese factory and...
He trailed off, looking pointedly at Undyne's feet, which had been in fairly close proximity to his face.
Never mind. That explains it.
Hey! Undyne pulled her legs off the couch, taking special care to knock Sans over. Papyrus blinked. You dreamed you were working? How awful! It was too easy a target to pass up. The nap must have done him some good. Sans pushed himself upright.
Hey now, I resemble that remark,
he said, huffing in mock offense. Papyrus's phone bleeped. He pulled it from his pocket and winced. 5 unread messages from Alphys that were increasingly flustered in tone.
He said, not to run you out of the house, but I think Alphys is starting to worry.
Undyne sat up straight, digging her own phone from her back pocket.
Oh crap, she said. I had it on silent this whole time. She's gonna be so pissed.
She clambered to her feet.
Thanks for the grub, Paps, but I gotta go. Put some ice on that half of you, okay? Later, dorks.
She let herself out with the last muttered,
I didn't mean to take a 3-hour death nap. Oh geez, she's gonna kill me.
Papyrus sent a quick text to let Alphys know that Undyne was on her way home. He sat up, making his back pop all the way down.
He said. I thought you weren't going to let me sleep on this thing again.
I've brought dishonor upon this family,
Zan said, but he didn't seem terribly broken up about it. Papyrus thought he should probably get up, find something productive to do for a few hours. Maybe he could start getting that backlog of reports sorted, or clean something, or... Instead, he just stayed on the couch with Sans, watching TV and dozing. Uncomfortable and lumpy as it was an oasis, and he wasn't quite ready to leave it.